Hello and welcome to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent, with me, Chris Price. Joining me this week are Finn Dunlop, General Manager of independent retailer Macknade Fine Foods, and Anita Brightley-Hodges, Managing Director of consultancy Family Business Place. We're looking at the hot topic of apprenticeships. The government is poised to bring in a range of reforms in April, including the apprenticeship levy, which will charge large businesses a 0.5% tax on their wage bill to fund the training of apprentices. But questions have been raised about whether the way apprenticeships are being delivered, as official figures show the number of courses being finished in Kent has lagged well behind the number started over the last 10 years. Ivy Iverson reports.
The number of apprenticeships being completed in Kent is lagging well behind the number started. Official figures indicate that in the last 7 out of 10 years, just over half have finished their started apprenticeships. This comes as businesses prepare for reforms that are coming into force in April. These reforms are designed to increase the number of people taking this route. Graham Clues of the Medway Youth Trust says students need to know what they're getting themselves into.
One is around the quality of the guidance that young people get, making sure that their choices are actually sufficiently informed, they know exactly what they get themselves into. I think there's a second challenge as well. There have been lots of studies nationally that perhaps some young people just lack that readiness for work. That there may well be a gap in some provision that's needed below apprenticeships to make sure young people are apprenticeship ready.
But what should you do if you aren't happy with your apprenticeship?
The main things that young people should do is actually talk to their employer and also talk to their training provider or the further education college they're working with. Very often it can be possible for a young person to transfer, but if I was the employer, I would absolutely want to work with my provider to make sure I could refill that space with another young person.
Okay, so Finn, tell us a little bit about your experience of hiring an apprentice.
Been largely very positive. We've had a number of young workers coming through the business, and it's also important to note we've also had existing employees who we've embarked on apprenticeship courses as well. For example, we had a young lad who was at college going through apprentice. He came to ourselves as a young chef. He did his full apprenticeship with us as a chef. He completed that and stayed on as an employee. He then went to work in Germany, got further skills on the back of the skills and the experience he got with us. It really opened his eyes to the possibilities of where he could go. It gave focus and direction, and I think that's one of the key things that it gives to young apprentices. But it's also extremely beneficial to the employer as well, and that's something which we've really recognised over the last few years, is the advantages it gives us.
So you've obviously had a very good experience of apprenticeships. So were you surprised then when you saw the figures from the Department of Education Skills Funding Agency saying that in Kent, the number of finishes in many years has lagged quite far behind? You know, for 7 of the last 10 years, it's been below 60% finishes compared to the number of starts. Obviously, those figures don't directly correlate, but is that a surprising figure to you?
No. Well, yes, it is surprising. However, I think it's important to note that we've also had people who have not finished, but it's not always a negative. For example, we've had a student who is, or an apprentice who's been with us, has joined us, has embarked on an apprenticeship, and 6 months into his apprenticeship, he realised that he'd gained the strengths or capability to go on to do other more academic courses. He's now in the course of doing those, but he still works with us as a weekend member of staff. So it's great. It opens your eyes, and I think what's really important is that apprentices can learn any number of skills. It's not just focused in that particular area, but they can go on and develop other skills in whether it's customer service, whether it's just your focus and commitment and drive to see something through is really important to an employer.
Anita, you went a different way about
Yes.
hiring an apprentice. You
Yeah.
actually sort of went to do it yourself. Why did you decide to take that road? Does that have any bearing maybe on why you
I
those
think
changes in figures?
the figures don't really surprise me at all, because I think particularly for small businesses, I think the agencies involved just don't really get what's involved when you join a small business, because I think it's a bit of a shoehorn you into one of the available apprenticeships. And when you come into a small business, you know, there's so much more going on that's not catered for, and I think then that's quite demoralising, I think, for some of the apprentices that come on thinking they're going to be one thing, and then finding actually what makes a small business thrive is the flexibility that you're going to need. In the case of, but we have had 2 apprentices, and they were absolutely super. And then the type of apprentices you get. I mean, we've had a young mother that was, was on the apprenticeship scheme, and she found it quite hard getting the support she needed for her baby while she came to work. So sometimes that just caused a few problems, but we loved it a bit, so we just, went with it. But in the case of my daughter Olympia, she wanted to earn while she learned, and went to university, and then found it just wasn't for her. So came to see me and said, what's plan B, mum? Or plan C, whatever. And we sat down together and I said, we can get a new job, change a course, or I'll put together a bespoke 2-year apprenticeship package, which in terms of payment, in terms of hours, will be exactly as the apprenticeship scheme would be. But I could tailor make it two things. One, so that it's in line with my business, what I needed. The second part was that she needed the external mentorship, which I don't think apprentices get. The external mentorship from a super duper art school lecturer, and also I've lined up 3 or 4 work experiences for her. So the package was much broader, and so she could deliver real expertise. But
Do you think that businesses actually maybe you need a little bit too much? Because actually, obviously, you have very, and it's understandable, as a small business, you have very, very specific needs, and you want those needs to be filled by a new person that's coming in. And obviously, at the moment, training providers sort of create apprenticeships set to a framework kind of thing. They have certain things that they have to follow. Is there a way that you can really marry the two? Is there a way that we can fix that problem?
I think the apprenticeships providers should just talk more to businesses and find out exactly what the fit might be, because I think you sold one thing, which is we can provide these apprentices for you, which is fantastic. And we've always run postgrad schemes for kids leaving university, so we're quite used to it. But I think that it tends to be a bit sort of, now they're in post, we'll just sit back and forget about it. But there's a lot of work to be done in administering it. The sort of keeping the kids on track, making sure they have their assessments, making sure that they turn up on time. I mean, the simplest things like get to work on time is actually quite difficult for a lot of people. And, you wouldn't stand for that if they weren't an apprentice. And I think some people just find it difficult to get out of bed in the morning.
Can I just add on that? I think it's really important that employers recognise and the apprentices recognise that the skills they're learning in a particular industry or a particular sector, in a particular retail environment, as in mine, are not necessarily tying for life. Those skills they're learning are transferable to any industry. As I said earlier, if you're thinking about just the commitment to work, just having the ability to get up and go to work in the morning is then really important to tie that on to any other industry or workplace in the future. The other thing I'd like to pick up on what Anita was saying is that actually it's really important to have a mentor or an HR manager or a senior member of the team in each workplace, just to guide or mentor that apprentice through the scheme. Not only will the apprentice benefit, but that senior member of the team will also benefit. I think that is a really good way to make sure that the apprentice stays the course of the apprenticeship, and making sure they've got that mentorship.
And I think also, to have apprentices that have completed courses that have really shone, and then for them to get out and see other kids, and I don't really hear much about that, about the success stories. It just, and I think that would be fantastic, because to be inspired as a young person is really important, and to know that you don't have to go to university and get a degree and still be a fantastic, someone in business is huge.
So do you think, employers have not been shy in saying perhaps where there have been, where there might be issues sometimes in hiring apprentices, but are there things that employers can do, aside from some of the measures that you've mentioned, to really make them attractive and really make sure that when someone does take on an apprenticeship, that they are actually going to stay the course and get a positive result at the end of it?
Yes, for a start, the employer needs to look at the apprentice not just as a low-cost means of employment. The employer needs to recognise that apprentice as a valued member of the team, and through that, the apprentice will also get exposure to more areas of the business, and will be more rewarded, and will, not financially but just mentally, and the business will benefit as well. It's it's a two-way thing. And
Anita, do you think there's anything that employers need to be stepping up with? It's so easy to complain, isn't it? But sometimes
I think it's a fantastic scheme, and I think it's really about joining up all the dots with the providers, with the employers, matching the placement, and also just reaching those expectations. And I think that the more that we can talk about it and more we can shout about the successes, the more we can actually help people to think that's a great idea. I think I'd love to do an apprenticeship because I'm not cut out for uni, and the great thing about it is that every single business can benefit from it. And I think, Finn, you were perfectly right. It is I think it could enhance the reputation of your business if you are seen to be the person that really gets behind it. I know so many family businesses that employ apprentices, and it's a fantastic witness to how much they care about employing young people in their community, and giving them the skills to go on. Because what it's like, people say, I did my apprenticeship with so and so, they were great, what a wonderful thing.
They're ambassadors for you, ongoing beyond their apprenticeship, and they'll continue as customers or as ambassadors for the company.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your thoughts on that, guys. Moving on now, we're taking a look at some of the reforms coming in to apprenticeships. From April, the government will charge employers with a wage bill of more than £3 million and 0.5% tax on the money it pays staff. Companies can claim back the money if they use it to hire new apprentices or train existing staff. So we sent Joe Brophy to Rochester High Street to find out what people think.
Government reforms for businesses this year are designed to increase the number of people taking apprenticeships. The apprentice levy will be introduced in April, which will mean businesses with a wage bill of £3 million or more will pay a 0.5 tax percentage to fund apprentice training. We spoke to people in Rochester to find out more about what they thought.
I think it's a choice people should have, because in France they have a technical baccalaureate, so why don't they have a technical baccalaureate in the UK? So if people got a choice between going for a technical vocation or for an academic one.
People now just see it, they just drift into the university sometimes, don't they, when it's probably not for them.
Yeah.
So it's not for everybody.
It depends on the parents, I think.
That's what the university.
Students, and you've got to kind of gauge what different students want, what different kids want. Some of them are mad to go to university because they've heard about it. They want the university life. They want, the excitement that brings. And other kids are just quite happy to go through the apprenticeship scheme if it's available, and if not, then they're kind of just founder, I think, if they've not got any direction apart from that. So I think more apprenticeship schemes are better.
No harm at all in having more publicity about it and getting people to come and talk about it, and what the apprenticeships are. I think people tend to think apprenticeships are just in like skills like plumbing or brick building, something like that, where there are so many more different types of apprenticeship, not just in the hands-on skilled things like that. So yes, I think probably a good idea.
This is Joe Brophy in Rochester for KMTV.
Okay, I'm delighted to say for the next section of the show we're joined by Olympia, who is the apprentice at Family Business Place and also Anita's daughter. So I'm sure she'll give us lots of insight, very true insight into the apprenticeship setup. But I just wanted to start off by asking about this new apprenticeship levy, which will charge large businesses a 0.5% tax. Is that the right way to go about making firms take on more apprentices, do you think?
Well, I suppose from what we've seen earlier about the apprenticeship schemes not necessarily always being seen through, if this is a means of recruiting more apprentices and putting more funding into means of retaining them and enabling them to see it through, then everything does have a cost at some stage. So it might not be great up front, but if it does mean that we can get more from it at the end of the day, then so be it.
Anita, business hasn't been shy, as we did say briefly before, about saying there's a problem. So is it fair, the government has listened and said, okay, we're going to get businesses to help design the apprentices, these so-called trailblazers, and they've gone in there and they've sort of, adjusted the framework. So is it fair then to really, if they're going to come in and get the change they want, that they should, pay a bit of a contribution towards it?
I've always felt that apprenticeships should be fully funded by the government.
Right.
Because you don't know what type of apprentice you're going to get. You have no idea about their history. You've no idea about their potential. For a lot of businesses, it is a buy before you try, which is perfect. But for small businesses, with the red tape that goes with it already, and also, you know, the disappointment to know whether you qualify or not, and the hoops you have to jump through, you know, I'm just not surprised really that I don't think you can on a small business. We've got enough to deal with without an extra levy, you know, and where's it all stop? I think they should be fully funded, absolutely.
Right. Olympia, so you're an apprentice at the moment.
Yes.
Do you think that, you know, despite all these, you know, ways that the government is trying to make apprenticeships more attractive and fund them, do you think that actually that there is enough awareness, particularly perhaps in schools, of the opportunity of doing an apprenticeship?
Yeah, I think definitely not. I mean, I came out of school about 3 years ago, and it's only recently that I've sort of heard about it. But going to a grammar school, it was unheard of. It was just not really an option that they pushed. I mean, there's careers advisors that you'd have meetings with, but it was all about uni. And for someone like me, I wasn't cut out for uni. So I went into it knowing that and not being very confident about it. And then it worked out that it just wasn't for me. So coming onto an apprenticeship was perfect, but I wish I'd known 2 years before so I could have done something about it, but no.
And is that a common experience, do you think, for young people at the moment, that they're not aware? You know, the people that you've taken on, were they aware before?
Well, I think there are what's interesting is there's ways of doing apprenticeships. It's not always an apprentice who you're recruiting into the business. We have a number of employees who are already employed with us, who then go into an apprenticeship with us whilst they're employees, which is another way of doing it, starting in something and then thinking, oh, okay, now this could be something, and working through it that way. So there's any number of ways of getting into apprenticeships, I think there needs to be more awareness of the possibilities, and we need to get better at publicising those.
We've talked a lot about how for business the perception of apprenticeships has changed, but actually I'd be quite interested to hear from Olympia whether or not you think among young people the perception of apprenticeships has actually changed as a route to a career.
Well, I think, as you said earlier, when you think of apprenticeships, you think a builder, an electrician. But I think if young people knew that you could do it in graphic design or media or something a bit more exciting for girls as well. I mean, it's just typically boys that you think of doing apprenticeships. But I think if they publicise it to attract the whole of the audience, I think everyone would jump on board, because there are a lot of people that struggle through school, and they just think it's either uni or drop out and get a job. But I think this is a good in between.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you, what do you think about the calibre of young people who are coming through to do apprenticeships?
Well, I think what youngsters don't realise is that there isn't much talk about the higher level of apprenticeships that are equivalent to a degree level. So, you know, you could have a student that's leaving school thinking, do I want to have a £35,000 debt, you know, by the time I leave university? Or is there something of the calibre of which I can earn while I'm learning at a really great calibre in a particular subject? And there are some of those, but, you know, it's a nightmare finding out where they are. But I have lots of friends that have kids that are thinking about university, and they're just hesitant, and they're thinking, you know, lots of people you hear about leave university and can't get a job, and I think people are just concerned about getting a job at the end of it, and is it all going to be worth it? So I think much more needs to be done to help schools say, don't have to go to university but there are some really great high-level apprenticeships available out there.
Yeah, and what Anita's saying there, we have two of our members of our senior management team are currently going through apprenticeships in leadership and management, on level 5 diplomas, which is great, which people don't think about, and that's something you can do within a workplace and go on and develop your career and add it to your CV.
Brilliant. That's
really
fantastic. Guys, thank you very much for all of your input today. That's it for the latest edition of Chris & Co, our show looking at the issues affecting business in Kent. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.